Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to do an update for the Team 3v3 competitive. In this update we are going to first summarize the first game very briefly. Then we're going to talk about new rules changes on the basis of the first game. This is the first game, this is the file at the end. And then finally we will discuss a new tier list for countries given the new changes and this sort of thing. So to briefly summarize, there were three teams of three. The draft order was the first pick gets one pick, the second pick gets two, and then the third pick gets three, and then it's back to first pick picking another two, and then finally the second pick getting the last pick. And so on team one, we had a first pick of Russia, which I going in had regarded as the strongest pick. The scoring system was based on nominal GDP growth for the entire team. Then we got to team two picking up France and Prussia. I had felt that Prussia was kind of on the weaker side, and so this was a bit of an early draft pick, although with the new scoring system, Prussia's going to look better. And then we got team three picking up Xing, USA, and UK, followed by the wheel for team one, who picked up Austria and Brazil. And then finally, team two drafted Sicily in the last place. If you notice the bottom, there is the scores for each of these, with team one managing to get a growth of 62 million for a percentage growth of 193 million. We were just scoring nominal GDP growth. Moving forward, we will score on the basis of percentage. Team 2 got a growth of 19 million for 142% growth, and Team 3 was the winner with 142 million growth, or 170%. China in particular was kind of, I think, the one to really focus on, or Great Xing here. They start with an enormous GDP, and they actually grew more by themselves than any other team combined. And so China has this enormous growth potential, and so they are a little bit of, an outlier for this regard. I think generally speaking, Team 3 also just crushed the draft. In particular, I think that the lack of drafting East India Company was a miss by Teams 1 and 2, and I think that Brazil and Sicily in particular might have been a little on the weak side, but this is how things go. So let's jump in and kind of take a look a little bit, just kind of closer at the end of the map, and talk about what had happened. So opening the game, USA went for Puppet on Mexico, and that was a majority of USA's activity on Team 3. Teams are, Great Britain and China had the nice expansion idea of going for, in particular, Punjab, which has an enormous amount of GDP by itself, and so this was a good way for generating a lot of score. Notably, with the East India Company or China, you can kind of go after Punjab very easily, and so this was kind of the plan. Great Xing went out of their way to subjugate a lot of people, and did integrate some of them. Russia went after a majority of Central Asia. There weren't very many PvP wars. They probably should have annexed Persia before the end date, and they would have picked up this additional 6 million GDP. And overall, let's see, we talked about Great Xing, and we talked about USA. The final team member on Team 3 was the UK, which really didn't expand that much beyond just picking up Punjab at the beginning of the game. On Team 1, we had Russia, Austria, and Brazil. I think that Team 1's strategy was involved. Russia starts out with a lot of population, and so does Austria, and so the idea of funneling pops into the new world, I think, is a decent strategy, because it will work. I think it'll work okay, but the time scale was perhaps not good enough. We only played 10 years. Moving forward, I think we're going to put a minimum of 15 years played on the start date starts, or 14 years played, something like this. Brazil on this team managed to puppet a lot, but they didn't annex, which kind of left some GDP on the table here that they could have picked up, to bolster their score. At the very end, Brazil had a GDP of, let's take a look, Brazil had a GDP of 11 million and grew about 5 million. If they annexed some of these powers, it would have been, an additional 3 million. And so this could have represented a lot of additional score for Brazil. But I think that players being able to, do this moving forward is going to be good. In particular, Austria, they reached a point of the game, both teams 1 and 2, when Team 3 was running away with the game, that's so when Xing and the UK and the US were running away with the game, they really needed to come together earlier and try and find a way to break them down. Specifically, releasing Xing countries, I think, would have been quite strong, but they didn't, and so Team 3 ran away with the game, and Team 1 in particular... Team 1 in particular did take Silesia off of Team 2's Prussia, and this already had an enormous amount of iron mines and coal mines and lead mines, and this pretty much sunk Prussia. This is one of the reasons why, looking back at the scoring, Austria had the highest percent GDP growth because they took Prussia's most valuable state, and Prussia had some of the worst GDP growth, only growing 11%, because most of their efforts were contained in Silesia, which was taken from them. So this apparently, or makes it seem to some degree, that this strategy is... of building up in one state and getting the economies of scale bonus has some risk when players can take those states off of you. But that was kind of Team 1's expansion. And Team 2 was Prussia, France, and 2 Sicilies. And I think they were trying to lean into the strategy of using unification plays to greatly increase their GDP because they had both Italy and Prussia. Unfortunately, with Prussia specifically, Austria can block you a lot. I think Prussia is really going to be a pick that shines when you have Austria on your side, because you can very easily kind of help facilitate this kind of going through. Additionally, with Sweden, you can kind of help out, or if you have Prussia-Sweden, you can help form, what is this, not the Netherlands. It's not the Netherlands. Scandinavia, there we go. And so that was interesting. But yeah, this is what wrecked Team 2. But I think it was a smart play by Team 1. So generally speaking, with the tripodal balance, if one person starts getting too strong, you should go after them. But once Team 3 had run away with the game, I think the play to take this, which was an enormous amount of GDP, was really strong. I think they probably should have taken Brandenburg as well, if they wanted to really sink Prussia by cutting the market in half, this sort of thing. So half the states either on the right or the left would be denied. But this is fine. Interestingly, 2 Sicilies could have declared war on Prussia and just demanded Brandenburg and Silesia themselves, and then Prussia could have backed down to their ally of 2 Sicilies in order to brick Austria's war goals. This is something you could do in the 3v3 competitive, which is a bit gamey, but we're trying to do kind of a high-powered game. And so this is how things looked at the end, just kind of looking at the GDPs. If we sort by biggest GDP, the top 2 members are on Team 3, and then the third member is East India Company, which went undrafted. And then we have a Team 1 player, another Team 1 player, a Team 3 player, and then we have a Team 2 player, and then down here, Team 2 player, Team 1 player, and where's 2 Sicilies? Where's 2 Sicilies? I swear I've eyes. Oh, 2 Sicilies is right here, which is the other 2 team players. So that rounds it out. And so that kind of is the way things went. In particular, China looks absolutely insane in this format. And so this kind of brings us to our next sort of one, which, jumping back into the browser for a moment, changes to the 3v3 format, which is we're going to change the scoring moving forward. These are possible rules changes down here that we haven't implemented, but moving forward, we will still score mostly or most heavily on nominal GDP growth, giving 4 points to first, second, 2 points to second, 1 point to third. But now we are also going to score for percentage team GDP growth. And so this will really punish and make China look a lot worse in that regard. And finally, I will give 1 additional point to someone in the league. And so this is going to be how we're going to be scoring moving forward. In particular, you might notice there's a possibility for a tie. If someone gets first place in nominal GDP growth, and they also get last place in team percentage GDP growth, they will have a total of 5 points. And someone can also get first place here in team GDP growth percentage, and also second place in nominal growth, which will add up to 5. In the event of a tie in this manner, the team that has first place in team percent GDP growth and second place in nominal team GDP will be the winner. And so that's how things are going to be. If there's a tie for second, if that's the case, we'll have to... No, there won't be a tie for second if that's the case. I'll figure out a way to tie break second place if there are going to be ties for second. Like if a team just gets first on both, and then one team gets second and then third, another gets second and third, then the winner will be the team that has the higher ranking in nominal team GDP growth. Okay. So moving back, and let's take a look at how the scores were for the game, and we can kind of, think a little bit through this a little bit more. Team 1 actually had the largest percentage GDP growth. Now, I think Team 3 performed the best, and they deserve to win, and even under this new scoring system, they still would have been the winners because they had this monstrous GDP growth. But I think that it would have been closer. There would have been a little bit more points for Team 1. In particular, them taking some dirt off of Prussia was strong. I think Prussia, you could have defended against that, in particular by letting two Sicilies have it. But okay, so this is just an update of the game. Now, let's talk about, and the new scoring system. Let's talk about the tier list. So, coming into the country rankings, we have new rankings for these countries, and just going to briefly talk about these countries, as well as a bunch of new countries appearing on here. So, upgraded France on the basis relative to Russia. Russia has, they have a lot of, we can scroll this over. Russia has a lot of, pops and this sort of stuff, and they have a lot of res and these sort of things. They have pops, res, and they're well balanced, but they are a little bit backward. And I think that I failed to appreciate how important technology was. I still think Russia's a really strong pick. It's one of the more balanced picks, but I put France up here. Notably, having a lower GDP and having a high power relative to that GDP is pretty good, and France is kind of in that spot. With only 28 million, they have a lot of room for growth, for scoring well on the GDP growth, and they also have the strongest military at the start of the game, so we bumped them ahead of Russia. Russia, we have a second pick. Great Qing upgraded to third place. If there was not a new scoring system, they probably would have been upgraded for first. They definitely have the most growth. I think teams 1 and 2 could have also taken great lengths to kind of kneecap Great Qing at the start. I think Great Qing's problem is that it's very vulnerable, and so when you pick it, you have a lot of growth potential, but the other teams could just unite at the very start of the game and decide that they're going to, take either war reps or release stuff, possibly in multiple wars, and really shake up the nature of the start. If this seems necessary, and there's not a whole lot you can do, but a country like France is really good at defending itself early on. For the UK, we downgraded it slightly, mainly just to move Great Qing up. This is the reason. There's also an awkward situation with the East India Company, wherein I'm not sure exactly how you're supposed to play it from both sides. If different teams draft, one drafts UK, one drafts the East India Company, I think that the status quo will be kind of UK releasing East India Company after East India Company, makes demands for this. But perhaps not. Perhaps you just want to cling on to what you're being paid out, and you could tell East India Company to sort of make me, and then they might make you. We'll see how that goes. This might make it so that with the East India Company, you want in particular a really strong draft militarily, so that you can enforce on the United Kingdom early. However, the UK, if you have multiple wars, or you can convince multiple people to come in, releasing Scotland and Ireland and this sort of thing, and or taking UK states, they can really be kneecapped. So I think they probably have to be careful trying to sink East India Company's ship before it leaves the harbor, as it were. For USA, we did upgrade them. I think they have a lot of growth potential. In particular, they start out with skirmish infantry, and they start off with the conscript law, which I think puts them in a good position in regards to, you want a small military for being able to fight the AI, and then you want a large military for PvP, and I think the conscript law helps facilitate that, and the USA starts with it. And they also are a great migration sink. USA seems like a really good pairing with either Russia or with Austria, because you can pull off a whole lot of migrants and just be more efficient with the labor. All the scoring is based on team performance, not individual performance, so you don't really have to worry about siphoning off migrants. It's good for the team, this sort of thing. East India Company we have at 7th, and I think perhaps it should be even higher. And the reason for this is relative to, what's going on with, we didn't get to see the East India Company played because no one picked it, but relative to someone like China, they're very similar in that they have very large starting GDPs, and they have enormous populations, and most of their GDP is in fact coming from this huge subsistence farms and huge arable land. But East India Company in particular has the opportunity to annex all these subjects for enormous GDP growth. For example, annexing Hyderabad, that's 6 million, and they will have a lot of cheap, in terms of infamy, annexations that are possible here. here. And so I think they have a lot of potential for growth. They have better tech than Great Qing. They have a much smaller pop than Great Qing. And so, 128 million versus like 380 million. But now that the percentage scoring is based on percent GDP growth as well, maybe you would rather actually have less pops, because you're still going to be able to grow a ton with 129 million and something like this. And so East India Company seems like quite a strong pick. Also better tech and military. Another huge problem with them, though, is the discrimination. Their primary culture is English, and so and it is difficult to shift off of this. You can try and rush what's coming down, pan-nationalism, and then have the UK release you so you can form India, but you need to rush this and you would not be able to reach it at the end of the first session. So, but annexing up all these guys is maybe a really good strategy for the East India Company to facilitate growth, and they start out next to Punjab, which in particular is like the highest GDP province that is not going to be likely drafted, and so being able to pick that up is useful. So jumping back into the Excel spreadsheet, we will talk about Prussia. I think Prussia benefits enormously from the new system, because if we're scoring based on, if we're scoring based on your GDP growth percentage, Prussia starts out with actually quite a small GDP, and if you manage to draft a relatively lean team with Prussia, this will do quite well. A problem, I think you have to draft Prussia late, though. I think it deserves to be relatively low. I don't think it's better than the East India Company, and so it's a bit of a unique situation. Drafting Prussia and Austria together seems like a very strong strategy, because with Prussia specifically, if you can, let's jump back in here. If you can unite all of Germany, there's a ton of eco in here, and you can unify it at relatively low infamy so that you can't get down to size C-bead, and you can form the North German Fed, and this represents an enormous growth potential. Same with Sweden. And so I think that, it's an interesting strategy. Team 2, they drafted this Prussia, 2 Sicilies, and France. If they had Austria, Prussia, and 2 Sicilies, they probably would have been able to form both Italy and North German Fed and just have this nice looking block. I think they would have been weaker overall, because I don't think Austria is as good as France, but maybe this is the way to go, or this is the strategy, because this way you guarantee yourself some sort of growth here. But also, notably, Prussia is one of the ones who starts with skirmish infantry, which I think is going to be something that is going to be very valuable. You can feed, high pop provinces to skirmish infantry countries, so that you can use the conscripts on skirmish infantry. For example, if you feed Prussia a bunch of Chinese provinces, then they can conscript out of their 50 battalions with skirmish infantry. And so I think skirmish infantry is going to be particularly useful for PvP wars. If people want to do it, I think you have to try and diplo 2 people to dogpile on one team, or 2 teams to dogpile on one team for day 1 PvP wars to be effective, because I think that the 3rd team wins. And then we have this scrum, and to be honest, 9 through 15, I'm not super confident which is best. I've tried to think about it quite a bit, and so we're just going to go through some of the logic between the two, between all of them. Spain has a decent population. It didn't move. I was going to downgrade it, but then I decided I think the technology is really valuable. Specifically, when your GDP is really small, the amount you can grow it is not really a proportion or a function of your GDP anymore. Like, the reason China has a huge GDP growth is because it reflects a bunch of pops, but once you're kind of down in here, your growth potential is now, you can acquire whatever you're acquiring in terms of like expansion is going to greatly increase like what your starting chunk is. And so expansion, relatively speaking, is much more important than natural growth, and so all of these have a decent capacity for expansion. The exceptions being Japan and Ottoman Empire start out with like a lot more pops, but Spain has a decent amount of pops at the start of the game. So like if we come back into the game and just sort by pops, Spain is up here with 13 milli, and so this is going to be a decent one. But moving on and just kind of talking through these rankings, Spain they have decent population. They have a decent capacity for expansion. They have some subjects they can annex for some low infamy GDP increase. Japan has a lot of the pop growth potential, and it has a lot of the same potentials and benefits as Great Qing and East India Company. I don't know if they would play breadbasket as well, because they don't have any farming bonuses on their states or this sort of stuff like East India Company and Great Qing do. I think that it's possible that both these guys can go agrarianism very well for their team if you can work it out so that you're all in the same customs union, this sort of thing. I think the Ottoman Empire has a bunch of potential, especially because you can use a revolution on yourself to brick Tanzimat, and so you just get rid of all the negative things, but you're really far behind technologically, and so your growth would not be, maybe it's a little stunted. Belgium specifically, we put +5 ranking on, and this is because I was unaware Belgium starts out with some of the best laws, and they also start off with some of the best tech. And so just coming into it, Belgium starts off with, let's see if they still have it, but they start off with national militia, and they also have skirmish infantry. They are like one of the smallest countries. Prussia has skirmish infantry, France, Great Britain, skirmish infantry, the USA has skirmish infantry. I think that's it, other than Belgium. And so if you feed Belgium like provinces, this can be quite good, I think. And if you were just looking to, feed the small little beast with your 9th place pick, maybe Belgium's the one to go in particular. Okay, moving on. Mexico and Brazil, I think you are relying on population. In particular, I think Mexico's better than Brazil, but Mexico's really awkward because I think whoever's the USA player will want to annex you every time. And so perhaps Mexico, from a diplomatic perspective, doesn't deserve the 13th place. The two teams 1 and 3 worked out that USA gets North America and then Brazil gets South America, which seems like a good deal. And so if you use Brazil to sort of lock in this sort of sphere of influence where teams don't want to upset you and they just roll over and let you have South America, this is perhaps a good strategy, but it's probably going to only pay off in the second session. We're going to look to play maybe 2 sessions the next time, and so this will make long-term strategies pay off better. Sweden in particular upgraded because I think you can form Scandinavia as a good way to pick up stuff, and they also have insane resource modifiers on just about every Scandinavian state. I think it's really valuable. Netherlands was pretty high before because you can annex the Dutch East Indies as a form of GDP growth. Perhaps they should score higher, but they're not the best in tech. Two Sicilies we also downgraded here because I think that for Two Sicilies to work, I think you probably need to draft Austria or you need to formulate some sort of agreement. That way you can form Italy. And other than that, the resources aren't the best, the tech isn't the best, all this sort of stuff. I think, for example, Sweden makes for a better unification sort of play if you're going to be using, your 9th pick on here. I think Sweden is a better shout. Although maybe if you already have Austria, Two Sicilies can play all right. Korea, we put in here, it has a high pops and it accepts Han pops, but we're down at 18th place. And Egypt, we downgraded several spots. And so this is, in my mind, kind of the current tier list or power rankings for the teams. I'm really uncertain. Like 1 through 8, I think are just like locked in. And I think that it's hard to make an argument that these are not the top 8, but after this, I'm really not sure who's 9th. Down to 15th place. I don't have a strong idea, and maybe it's contextual what you draft. Maybe even in some circumstances you can forego one of these other guys for an 8th pick, but I really have no idea who you would want to take. I can't imagine a situation where I would want to leave Prussia on the table or the East India Company on the table with my 8th pick, for one of these other guys who's 9 through 15. But this is kind of just the update to the power rankings. Again, just let's kind of come on over. Moving forward, we will be scoring based on the combination of percent GDP growth and also nominal growth, slightly weighing more nominal team growth. We will be having another game this Saturday, and hopefully for this game, we will hopefully play 2 sessions. Looking to have it be 50 years at the end of 4 sessions, and so that's probably going to be 14 years the first session, then 13 years, and then 12 years, and then 11 years, because the game will progress a little bit slower, and 14 plus 13 plus 12 plus 11 with my weightlifting or lifting kind of brain where 4, 3, 2, to 1, it adds up to 10, which is quite nice. And so this will kind of be what we look to do, I think, just to also take a look at the sort of thing for league points. I just doubled what I said that I was going to give the teams. That way we are rewarding 40 total league points for this. We have Brandon. I don't know what the full name was. Brandon with 7 points. Too Many Ducks, 7 points. Nicholas, 7 points. These were the people on the first team. Then we have Joey's World, who I gave the discretionary point to, in particular because I was liking the way he was organizing his economy, and he was very active in the Diplo. Then we have Paul 34 with 4 points, Earthrat with 4 points, and Joey got the discretionary point plus 4. And we have Stay Frosty with 2, Ghostmaster with 2, and Dare Blue with 2. And so that's kind of the standings. I will be keeping track of all of these for patch 1.3, and then we can have a ranking at the end. And also, if we manage to get enough of these through, we might just have make teams out of the highest point players to try and have a finale for patch 1.3, something like this, moving forward, which I think would be interesting. Also, a lot of the strategies are going to develop as time goes on. You know, there's just exploring this has been incredibly interesting because there's so much unsolved. Like, I was just experimenting with the fact that you can break you can reset your infamy by getting cut down to size. And so you could start an infamy, a war that costs like 120 infamy, and then you could have a teammate declare cut down to size CB on you, and then you just give in to them before you annex the 120 infamy versus stuff to completely like negate the infamy, which is a very interesting sort of way of doing things. And there's a ton of stuff like this, you know, and we're looking to play relatively high powered, so we're not going to ban it at this juncture because I think that having like some sort of solved competitive meta is interesting, and I think the 3v3v3 element is essential for this, because I think the way to balance this sort of thing is the fact that you have teams, and so it's not like first, second, and third don't have enormously stronger starts, even if there's a draft win, like first, second, and third would if it was just single player, and it allows a little bit more shenanigans. And in particular, I think you have to diplo and be aggressive about going after whoever's appearing strongest, which did not happen in this game we played because Great Shing and Great Britain and USA were just running away with it, and then teams 1 and 2 did not adjust in a dynamic way to try and go after Great Shing, because you could declare war and you release UA and like this type of stuff and take war reps off Great Shing and these sorts of stuff. You can't break these war goals very easily. Like I was talking about how, you know, Italy could have bricked Silesia annexation by annexing it themselves first, specifically releasing countries that are multiple states, and also releasing and taking war reps is a nice way to kneecap someone, and so I would have loved to see more of this. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm very excited about the format. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and or tune in this Saturday. It's going to be 9:30 PST. It's probably going to run 3 to 3.5 hours in order to play the first 14 years of the game instead of just the first 10. Very excited. Hope you enjoyed. Feel free to like, comment. I already did that, Jazz. Have a good one.